So let's get into this topic of office politics then. So, what do we actually mean when we say office politics?
Office politics is really about how we navigate the relationships in the office and how we get things done, really. How do things really happen? So if you think about an office environment, you've got two fundamental things. You've got the formal processes that are set out. This is the way we do X, Y, and Z. This is the way we make decisions. Then you've also got different people. And of course, different people have different assumptions, values, goals, and beliefs. So you fundamentally got those two things colliding, and actually it's people navigating each other and trying to navigate around those processes. So people think, oh, it's the company that's political, but actually a lot of the time, well, all the time, it is the people, because it's how we're getting around those processes and finding our own ways to make things happen.
So, what key things would you recommend people do to successfully deal with, let's say, negative office politics if it has gone wrong?
Yeah, and it's interesting how far that extends. When I run a workshop session, one of the things I do, there's a deeper diagnostic, but a quite simple diagnostic I get people to do in the room is a quick run through on some questions to assess how political they think their organisation is, negatively political.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because I've run this before for people that are all from the same organisation in the same room. So very often they're not wanting to share their results with one another, but the results can be remarkably different. So the reason for that is you've often got a culture of a company as a whole, but then you can get differences between divisions and teams. So sometimes it's about understanding what's going on just in your team. And it's very easy sometimes if you feel negative about politics to just think, oh, it's the whole company. Blame the leadership team. And that could be true, but sometimes it could just be where you're working. So I would say start small. You know, when I go in and do this sort of work, it's running it for a team at a time, ideally, unless you're doing a quick lunch and learn, just raise awareness session, and try and build blocks of it. So work on the relationships close to you first. How can you start being more positive? How can you start putting yourself in other people's shoes? Because very often what happens is we make an assumption based on our knowledge of what someone else might be thinking.
And do you find that sometimes people think that maybe they can just ignore the office politics and step back?
Yes, is the very short answer. And that's when people often stop progressing in their career.
Right.
And so the people that say, oh, I just want to come in and do my day job, I don't want to get involved in all that. And I get, we don't want to get involved in conflict and difficulties, but actually by stepping out of that, you're often stepping out of progressing, sadly, because if you just hide in your getting your work done bubble, you're not going to be working on the relationships around you. You won't get noticed. You know, we all like to think our work will just get noticed, but there's all that work that's been done by Coleman that says actually exposure, gaining exposure is one of the biggest impactors of career success.
Something that's crossed my mind as well, because obviously now we are still kind of in lockdown from COVID-19. How's that kind of virtual working had an impact on office politics? Have they just disappeared since we've all been working?
Well, this is the interesting thing, and I don't think we'll fully know until we go back to the offices to some degree. But it certainly won't have disappeared. I think if anything, it could have become worse, because if you think at home, we've lost a lot of the cues. So you could say in some ways we've lost some of the things that help us develop negative assumptions, but we can read people less well. We don't just see them around. We don't see what's going on. We don't know who's having conversations. Of course, in the office, we don't know about all the conversations that go on, but at home, we definitely don't know. We don't know if our boss is actually ringing up our colleague a lot more and relying on them more than us. What's going on with that relationship? We don't have that visibility. Whereas when you're physically with people and the casual, people call it different things, but coffee machine conversation or, just stopping by, you learn a lot that way. And everything now has to be full of intent. You know, if you think about it, you can't just stop and have a chat with someone. You have to ring them up, and that seems a bit weird unless you have a reason. Unless you're particularly friendly and just call to say hi. I know there is some of that going on.
So if there's anybody listening that is experiencing negative office politics at the moment, what would be your one gem of advice that you could give them?
One gem. Step back and think about the evolution of that relationship. If it's a particular person, think about, were there any key defining things that have happened? You know, actual tangible things that you would both say had happened. Are there assumptions you're making that could be incorrect?